Hello everyone, and welcome to Ashley Coffardy's webinar, TikTok, Better Heart Health webinar in honor of Heart Health Month. We have the delicious Bella Brown Seafood joining us today, and we are very excited to have Chef Rick Moonen as our guest. There'll be a short Q&A at the end of the webinar, so please send in any questions in the chat box. And if you would like to view the webinar again, it will be posted on Ashley's website and YouTube channel early next week. Right, over to you, Ashley.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, it is time. It's that time of year, although with the weather right now, it does not necessarily feel like February, but February is Heart Health Month. And I always have mixed feelings when it comes to the months that are, related to certain related to certain health things, because we should not be focusing on our heart health 1 month a year. And so sometimes I feel like, oh, I shouldn't promote this or be talking about it. But then I had this different thought. And the thought is, why don't I take this time each, during the year, take each month and tackle a different topic as a way for you to have in your whole library, as you have with all of our webinars, the information about these critical topics. So we are going to talk about heart health nutrition. One of the things I want everybody to do first is take a deep breath in and then exhale, because nothing that you are going to learn here is specific just to your heart. Remember, your heart is within your entire body, and certainly not just the heart muscle, but also your circulatory system. So everything that we've talked about, whether it's on the digestive health webinar, or whether it's on an anti-inflammatory, or whether it was on food being delicious, better nutrition, better be delicious, that's definitely going to be part of our topic today. So what I want you to, what we're going to do today is we are going to talk about what the heart needs, and we are going to focus a little bit on what it doesn't need so that we can make sure that we're getting that. But remember, this should not add extra stress. It's not like you need to write down a whole bunch of things, and those are going to be very different from what you've learned in the other webinars. So part of the reason I'm also doing that is that we can spend a heck of a lot of time talking about how do we get this great heart health foods and the nutrients that they contain in deliciously. So I am thrilled to have a great friend of mine here today. Definitely you guys are along for a fast and furious ride with us. So when I get to introducing Rick, I'll tell you more about him, but he is a chef, an author, an educator. I learned so much when I spend time with him, not just about how to cook better, but also about sourcing better and great combinations, etc. And as always, I want to thank my Ashley Koff approved partners, Manitoba Harvest, Natural Vitality, True Brock, Nature's Path. And we have a special guest joining us today, Bella Seafood, an incredible, I'm such a fan of sardines, and by the end of this webinar you will be too. But you also may be trying mackerel, and you may be understanding how to choose better tuna. Those are all things I endeavor to accomplish today. And when it comes to hemp hearts or whole organic grains and following mostly a plant-based diet, and with Natural Vitality, we've talked a lot in other webinars about magnesium in particular, but the role of minerals, and certainly ones that are highly bioavailable, and being able to get them into the body, as well as better detoxification. We have a whole webinar dedicated to that, and that's where True Brock and broccoli definitely come in. So when it comes to all of these, we're going to, as I go throughout the webinar, I'm going to help you to understand how these partners and their products also factor into better heart health choices. So let's get going. All right, what do we want is what we're going to cover. How can we get it? How can we keep it? And that's where we're going to bring in our friend, Chef Rick Moonen, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. Okay, so we all want better health, but today we're also talking about we want better heart health. So how are we going to get it? A lot of times people are confused. People will come to my office and say, the doctor wants me to take cholesterol-lowering medication, but I would prefer to do it with food and diet. Is that something that I can do? And other people will say to me, I'm really worried about, I have a relative who passed away early from coronary artery disease, or others will say, I just don't even understand what my labs mean, but my doctor said that there is something going on with my heart. So we're going to take a look at what better heart health means today. So when it comes to how can we get better heart health, it's going to be about what we choose to eat more often and what we choose to avoid more often. That's something that's really important because I would say we are at a different place today than we were certainly even when I got into nutrition in the mid 90s, as far as from an education standpoint or being an educator, as well as even before that, in the decades before that. And what I'm talking about is, it used to be with heart health that we would focus in on either a nutrient or a nutrient group, and we would say, okay, just avoid that. What I'm talking about is avoiding all fats, right? We tried avoiding all fats. Some of us have tried avoiding all carbohydrates. Some of us have said, hey, it's about getting rid of all of the sodium. Then at other times we've heard, hey, it's about having these types of fats. And then it's the debate of, okay, maybe we shouldn't have saturated fats, but we should have monounsaturated fats. And then somebody, comes in, like a Marion Nestle, who's so smart, and comes in and says, yeah, so there's no foods that in nature that are just the one type of fat, right? They all have combinations, so why are we, pinpointing one type of fat? And we also ran into a big fat problem when chemistry labs and food manufacturers started to make partially hydrogenated oils, which they're called trans fats, and we now know that those are so bad for us, we're even banning those. And part of what the idea there is that we thought, okay, we don't want to have saturated fats. And remember, saturated fats are the ones that are solid, so outside of the body or like on the kitchen counter, they'd be the solid fat, right? Or but what we want the unsaturated fats, the ones that are liquid. And so why not take something that is a saturated fat and then change it so that in our body it's an unsaturated fat? And what we came to learn from that and many other experiences is that the body is smarter than we are, and certainly smarter than food scientists in a chemistry lab that are playing around with changing something up. And what happened is it really figured out we really were giving it was not what it recognized easily and not what it wanted to use effectively and efficiently. And the same thing happened when we started to follow diets where we were just reducing the sodium and reducing the sodium and reducing the sodium. We might, if you were having way too much sodium, we might see, and certainly if you're somebody who's more salt sensitive, we might see that that's a problem. But as we started to look at healthy people and they were dropping all the salt out, first of all, what were we replacing it with? Because our food tasted not so great. But second of all, what we were realizing is we weren't seeing all of the benefits that we needed. And part of that is understanding that it's not all about what we need to avoid, it's also about what we need to consume. So one of the things that's really heart healthy for us is not just reducing our sodium intake, but it's also making sure we get adequate potassium. And potassium is a tough one. Do you know that the RDA, which is just the recommended daily allowance, is about 4,000 milligrams? That's 4 grams. That is a lot of potassium, especially when I talk about a banana having a couple hundred milligrams, or even a coconut water having 700 milligrams. The good news is, and especially if you're part of my Better Nutrition membership, I have a menu that you can do for a week where you go in and you'll see this is how you would have to eat and the great choices you can make to meet your potassium levels. And I also have an evaluation for you that looks at your dietary choices, your supplement choices, and also where you're at in your life, because we always want to assess where we're at to figure out if we are that person that needs more potassium maybe than the RDA, or maybe we need less. Maybe you've got something going on with the kidneys. So it can sound really confusing. I want to work on simplifying it a little. So what we choose to eat more often. My recommendation is organic more often. Now, some people will say to me, well, what about non-GMO? Well, first of all, and it's really important to know that organic is a government standard. It's regulated by the National Organic Standards Board, where they evaluate every 5 years. Any ingredient that is used in organic production is going to be evaluated. And included in the organic standards is that there cannot be any non-GMO, any genetically modified seeds. So organic is non-GMO, but it's more than non-GMO. And I think that's a really important thing, because we've become so focused on non-GMO. Are GMOs bad for our heart? I can't tell you that. I can't tell you that they are definitively, from a science standpoint, bad. I also can't tell you that they're safe and safe for all of us, but we don't have those scientific studies. And so I recommend organic as one way to reduce the intake of GMOs, but also as a way to avoid getting things that may irritate and overwhelm the body, like the persistent pollutants and chemicals that are used in a lot of farming. Things like, and we will pay attention to things like glyphosate, which can be sprayed on wheat. That's why I love that, Nature's Path, for example, is when they're using all organic grains, we're making sure that we're reducing not just our future generations' exposures to glyphosate, but we're also reducing our own intake of it. So I think that's really important. And that's also where I come over to whole. And whole, a great example there would be hemp seeds, right? I was talking about Manitoba Harvest earlier. Hemp seeds as a whole food, I like to say they're the plant kingdom's version of wild salmon because they have all these different essential fatty acids in there. Somewhere along the line, we've discovered that, certain essential fatty acids, like EPA, for example, is one omega-3, or DHA might be another omega-3 that you've heard about. And they are important for us. But we're putting a lot of importance on them, so much so that we have clinical trials and we have a lot of supplementation, and we even have those isolated omegas being fed to farmed animals, farmed fish, etc., instead of them getting the whole foods, like maybe algae or eating hemp or eating, whatever, the grass that they would eat in nature if they're a land animal. And they don't create the same nutrient profiles. It doesn't mean that farmed is bad and wild is good. It just means we shouldn't be comparing them. But what we should be looking for is whole sources of food more often. That means also, like if we're going to eat, quinoa, or we're going to eat brown rice, eat the whole grain more often rather than in the flour form, and certainly trying to avoid the refined form. Because just if we look at the example of wheat, if I take a shaft of wheat and I refine it into white flour, there's about an 80% reduction in magnesium. And why am I always talking about magnesium? Because that heart, that big thing that we see in front of us, is a muscle, and we have a lot of other muscles in the body. But that muscle, as much as it needs to contract to pump blood, it needs to relax. And that relaxation needs to happen in all of the cells throughout the body. We need to be able to turn off our stress response. Stress actually isn't the problem. It's something the body does for very specific reasons, but we have to turn it off, and the way we turn it off is with magnesium. And that's why I actually supplement my magnesium almost every night. I like to rub that Natural Calm cream on my body if I've had a tough workout or if I'm traveling. I've talked about Calm Bath before, but I like to take the supplement primarily because 70% of us are not meeting the recommended daily amount, which is just 400 milligrams. And I say just, but when you take a look at my magnesium evaluation, again on my website, and also the magnesium menu, you can see that a lot of us are not eating like that all the time. And it's important for us to get in enough magnesium on a daily basis. Okay, as we go in further, I'm going to talk about proteins, fats, carbohydrates, and we're definitely going to talk about vegetables, herbs, and spices. But let's keep moving because we're going to get to some delicious stuff coming up. All right, so one of the ways that we can do better for our hearts and for our overall body is to eat better fish. Now, it used to be, again, back to the 80s, 90s, I wasn't having this conversation. We were just saying, hey, eat fish, it's good for you. But we've learned over time that not all fish is both created equal, and unfortunately, because of some of the things that are happening from an environmental standpoint, not all fish are as healthy as they can be today. They're dealing with the same pollution and the same challenges to their detoxification capabilities that we are. So what we need to do if we want to eat fish is actually to eat better fish. But why do we want to eat fish? Why is fish so great for us? Well, we certainly need protein. Protein builds our cells, it builds our brain power, it also provides us energy and is a core part of our communication. That means our hormonal system as well as enzymes that help to break down food and also create other things. And they're also a great source of those essential fatty acids. Yes, the omega-3s, but also omega-6, omega-7, omega-9, so many. Do you know there are 16 omegas in wild salmon, and in tiny sardines there are tons of different types of omegas. So yes, omega-3s do help maintain, we're talking about heart health, so they do help maintain that heart health by making sure that the blood viscosity, how thick your blood is, and to make sure that, we want to things to be flowing easily throughout our circulatory system, as well as allowing for those vessels to constrict. And that's really important because when we talk about the blood viscosity, sometimes I will remind people, you know, if you just started taking a fish oil supplement, for example, and you go to the dentist, your gums might bleed a little bit more. And that's something important. I always tell my dentist, you know, I make sure that I write on there when they're asking if I take medications, I always write on there that I take a fish oil supplement so that they know that part. Now, there might be other reasons that your gums are bleeding, and that's for them to explore and talk about with you. The other thing about omega-3s are they're super important for neurological development as well as total development for baby and as well as for mom to maintain her health throughout pregnancy, so in the pre and postnatal time period. But you know, a lot of times we don't think about our fish as sources of vitamins. And actually our fish, better fish, is actually one of the only sources of that great vitamin D that we need to be getting in. And also other antioxidants. So fish eat algae, they eat other sea vegetables, and when they're eating that, they actually create antioxidants themselves. That's why it's so silly to choose a fish source where they've been colored to look a certain way as opposed to getting a better source that naturally has the colors that it's meant to have. And we're just not meeting our recommended levels of omega-3s in that part. Okay, and with Bella, they put together this great sheet, which is great for us to know, is why is Bella better fish? So one of the key things, we're just about to jump into why it's so important, they taste great. You know, one of the things that is the biggest issue that I've found for people with wanting to enjoy fish is the smell of the fish when you open it and also the appearance of it. And nobody really wants to open up a container and think that it's like something like their cat food. And that is, I think, really important. And I say that because as somebody who, when they open up a container of cat food, doesn't appreciate it. For some people, it might be totally fine on that part. But the other piece that we want is we want local. We want to make sure that things are that fish are sustainably wild caught. We want to try. It's getting harder and harder. Although for as many challenging stories as we have, we also have better stories about the improvement of certain waters. But we want to make sure that where people are sourcing their fish from, the fish that we're going to eat, are as close to pristine as possible from a water standpoint. And also things that are really important include the things like, what is the can? You know, is the can not have BPA? So BPA NIA is, in my opinion, a better term than BPA free. It just means BPA non-intentionally added. So, you know, we never know what is actually going to be in the metals of certain things, but if we're not intentionally adding BPA, that's what I call a better, not perfect choice. Okay, so I'm going to run through a couple of some of my favorite fish choices. As I said, sardines, one of my absolute favorites. I love the ability to get in a serving of protein super, super easily, rich in those omega-3s. Also, a great source of calcium. So you'll see on my calcium menu and my calcium evaluation that one of the things I recommend is eating small fish like sardines, primarily because many of us are taking calcium supplements and eating calcium, and we're actually getting too much calcium. And calcium, as great as it is for our bones, is not great from a heart health standpoint. If we're getting in too much calcium, not only can it contribute to kidney stones, but it can also contribute to arterial plaque. And one of the issues there, first of all, we don't want to have that plaque. That's what clogs our arteries, right? And also can escape and damage those arteries, but also can be part of a clot. And one of the things about calcium is that it's dependent on vitamin D as well as the magnesium I was talking about and some other nutrients to get to our bones. So it's important that we're not just uploading on calcium, but that we're actually getting in an appropriate amount, which you can learn more about also on my calcium evaluation and then a calcium menu, to make sure that you're not getting too much. So I love recommending food sources of calcium first and then deciding if somebody needs a supplement. Tuna. Not all tuna is created equal. We'll talk a little bit about this with our guests coming up. But also, what is the tuna packed in? And if it's packed in organic extra virgin olive oil, packed in organic peri-peri, you're getting better nutrients there from those products as well. And one of the things I love about tuna, as we know, is it's such a great part, and better fish in general, but such a great part of so many different dietary choices that many of us are choosing to follow or having to follow. And mackerel. Many people may not even know what to do with mackerel. We'll talk to Rick about this in a moment. But the thing about mackerel is look at that. That tiny package is 28 grams of protein per serving. So if you're out there hitting it at the gym or crossfitting, or a lot of military folks, we'll talk to them about what can they travel with and what's easy. And the job that we have to do there is also help us customize our taste and understanding that it's delicious. So we've got some help to doing that. Okay, the person that I turned to when I said, how can I make sure that I convey that better heart health nutrition, in particular better fish, but we can talk about things like cacao, we can talk about green tea, we can talk about wine, so many different things. Better nutrition, Rick Moonen. Rick is a celebrity chef and cookbook author. He is somebody who has been leading the charge on sustainable seafood before any of us knew what sustainable seafood and what that charge actually meant. I'll have him chat with us a little bit about that. We're really lucky these days because Rick is actually bringing into my kitchen, as well as you guys all have the opportunity, the ability to use a lot of his tools. So he has his knives and even his steak knives that are available, and you can see some of the things that he's done on like Top Chef Masters and so many other things. And I'm really proud of him. In 2011, he was chosen by the Monterey Bay Aquarium as a Chef of the Year. So one of the things that we will talk about, Rick, is Seafood Watch and just how people can know what is better fish and how. So what we want to jump in and talk about is better nutrition, better heart health nutrition, better be delicious, but it also has to be better for all. So Rick, welcome.
Thank you, Ashley. Wow, I've learned so much just listening to you for the last 15 minutes. Amazing.
Thank you. And I should say, Rick has two adorable new puppies. If we hear them in the background, well, I am sure that they are eating sustainably and just enjoying themselves. So no worries on that part. So Rick, I'd love to hear a little bit from you back in your early days. Tell us when that was, but you were in New York, names like Oceana come to mind, and then you got this call about swordfish. Like, talk to us a little bit about your history with sustainable seafood.
Okay. Prior to my call about swordfish, I was taking a stand, and I actually organized 500 chefs across the 5,000 chefs across the United States to protest the fact that genetically engineered foods were being introduced into our food systems without mandatory labeling or pre-market safety testing. And that was appalling to us because our guests come to us into our restaurants with a certain trust. What we do for a living, they put in their mouth and it becomes a part of them and their families. So there was a campaign about GMOs and demanding labeling, etc. Out of that came a campaign that started in Washington, D.C. It was a combination of two organizations, CWEB and the National Resource Defense Council. And they started this awareness campaign about the state of the North Atlantic swordfish. The population of the North Atlantic swordfish had plummeted so much due to several factors: overfishing, bycatch, habitat destruction, etc., going in and fishing where there are known nurseries for their newborn swordfish, etc. I had seen a diminishment in size and availability of swordfish at the Fulton Fish Market. So I got a phone call from Nora Pouillon, a chef that had the first all-organic restaurant in the United States in Washington, D.C. We become friends because of the campaign about GMOs. And she said, look, I want you to join this campaign. It's called Give Swordfish a Break. And, what it is, if we don't do anything about it, the population will diminish to the point of becoming commercially extinct within the next 3 to 5 years. And I knew from my personal experience that I'd seen swordfish that used to be 300 pounds are now reduced to the size of under 100 pounds, which they call pups. A pup is a swordfish that hasn't reached sexual maturity yet, which is around 100 pounds. So below that, we're eating the babies. And so it totally made sense to me. I said, sure, I'll be glad to be a part of Give Swordfish a Break. And it became so widespread throughout the United States that people were talking about the problems with swordfish. And the government actually listened, took notice, made global changes. ICAT, which is an international organization that sets regulatory standards towards how we fish certain species, in this case the swordfish, Their nurseries got shut down. Their quotas changed. And we saw for the first time chefs' involvements, their voices, population of the United States listening to it and being outspoken about it. There was actually changes made in how certain fish were fished. And today, one of the things about seafood is they don't celebrate the victories as loudly as I would like to. Swordfish is considered, North Atlantic swordfish is now considered a good alternative or a best species again, once again. So they're sustainable. You can eat swordfish. And that was a result of getting people to speak out about it. Now, that's a great thing for swordfish, but there's a lot of other fish out there that fall into similar categories, such as bluefin tuna, Chilean sea bass, and the list goes on and on. You can see the red list, or things to avoid with the assessment entities such as Seafood Watch. Now, you're going to hear that. So Seafood Watch is the gold standard of assessing both wild and farmed species in our environment, things that we can consume for heart-healthy reasons, amongst many others. And they put a red light, a green light, and a yellow light on each and every species that we consume in the United States. Not all species that are available globally. That would be an enormous tome of information. But pretty much the most popular species are assessed as to whether or not they're good for the environment and yourself. Red meaning avoid, yellow being there's still some problems, but they're better choices, and green meaning go for it. This is something that's abundant, delicious. Well, not always delicious. That's a different topic. And but you know, good for the environment, good for you, and they are very helpful because Seafood Watch isn't pulling this out of a hat. They're connected to hundreds and hundreds of different organizations, science-based, aquariums, government regulatory agencies such as NOAA. They take in all of this information, and that's where they give you their recommendations for best seafood choices. Now, you can download it on your phone, seafoodwatch.com, and you can have it with you wherever you go, because it's a very, very complicated topic. There are so many factors that we use to define a sustainable source that you're best off feeling confident with someone that is really doing a good job, such as Seafood Watch. Now, I don't agree with absolutely everything that they say or do, but they are the best out there, my opinion.
I love that, and you know, in my world, everything is about better, not perfect, because I find that the pursuit of perfect is just leaving us perfectly stressed and confused and hangry and all those good things. So let's talk about one example in there. You and I had the great, I mean, you know, sometimes work is really, you know, hard for us. The great opportunity to go to Bristol Bay, Alaska, and enjoy the wild salmon there, and I actually got to enjoy a salmon that you prepared literally, like, right, I forget who caught it. I'm going to give your wife credit right now, but someone caught it, and then you prepared it right there. And, you know, one of the things that just frustrates me so much is these days, I mentioned it a little bit in my opening about how people compare wild and farm salmon. And so one of the things that I want to talk a little bit about, because you're someone who, I mean, has cooked with, has prepared not just up in Alaska wild salmon, but has chosen it. But we also wanted people to enjoy farm salmon, and it was something you actually did a bit of research on to figure, you know, out what you felt comfortable with, and what comfortable meant for you, I believe, was not just the sustainability piece, but also what would stand up. And I think in that space today, so talk a little bit about your path there. And one of the challenges I find for consumers today is in the farm space, they actually really need to know brand names and not just, you know, regions, unfortunately. I hope we move to a better system in that way. But would love to have you talk a little bit about salmon.
Okay, well, salmon is a great example of a source of omega-3s, polyunsaturated fats that are just so amazingly good for your cardiovascular system, your skin, your mental health, and that's your area of expertise. Enter Rick Moonen. It's the most popular fin fish in the world. So people understand salmon, they connect with it, they're not afraid of it. And these are all hurdles when you're trying to get people to consume, in the United States especially, seafood. So salmon is embraced. People understand it. I was brought up with it on the East Coast. We ate it every Friday. My mom would cook seafood at home. It was a religious dinner experience. And we rotated through salmon, swordfish, and fish sticks. That's pretty much our repertoire, our menu at home growing up in Flushing. So that was farm-raised Atlantic salmon. I did not know that growing up, but it became my benchmark of what salmon tasted, and you know, and I didn't think anything about nutrition as a child. I just enjoyed it. So later on, as I became a chef, I started to find out that farming is a rapidly growing sector of the seafood industry. And during the growing pains, there was a lot of mistakes being made because there wasn't a real science behind it as of yet. And so it had detrimental effects on the environment, the immediate environment, meaning escapes and competition for food that is needed by the native seafood of that region. And there is byproducts of a highly concentrated, stressful environment. In the beginning, they put way too many fish in a small pen in an open net in the ocean, and they were stressed out, so they got sick. Stick 50 people in an elevator, what do you have? One person sneezes, boom, everybody's sick. So that would happen, so they needed antibiotics. They started to use chemicals because they started to get sea lice, etc. So there was needs for pesticides. In these nets, algae starts to grow naturally on the nets, and so that starts to suffocate the seafood, the fish growing on the inside, so they had to put antifoulants to get rid of that. So they use copper or chemicals. A lot of things were being used that were bad. And I am of the belief system that only from a healthy environment can you get food that is nutritious and delicious. They come hand in hand. It's a beautiful thing. When you start enter technology and trying to control, then you're going to have problems. And that's what aquaculture was going through for a good decade. I didn't even serve farm-raised Atlantic salmon on my menus. I refused. I would only serve wild salmon. We have 5 species that still thrive in the Pacific, thank God. And when they weren't fresh or in season, I would use alternatives such as Arctic char, which also brings a good source of omega-3s. It's pink. People recognize it. It's embraceable still. Steelhead salmon, other, freshwater fish, but it's more of a trout than a salmon, but it also delivers the need for the pink salmon-esque experience. So later on down the path here, I started thinking about how are we going to have food security going forward. We're 7.5 billion on this planet today. We're going to go to 9.5 by 2050, as researched by Boris Worm. And how are we going to feed everyone? We already having problems at the present moment. 1 billion people are overweight, obese, sick, and another billion are malnourished to starving. So I looked at and I realized it's really nice and it's a great message to hug the tiny little fish farmer or the tiny little farm down the street and say they're organic, they're great, but we need large-scale solutions if we're going to be a healthy planet. So I started to look at certain of these companies that started to make changes, investments in aquaculture. Farm-raised Atlantic salmon grown in the Bay of Fundy, which starts in the Gulf of Maine and goes up into Canada, has a very unique environment. It's the largest tidal changes in the world, 30 feet difference between high and low tide, and there's 2 tides a day. So there's 4 exchanges of fresh Atlantic seafood, Atlantic water going in and out of the Bay of Fundy. An ideal situation for growing salmon, but if you put too many in there, that environment is not designed to handle that type of stress. Well, these companies started to hear that there was pushback from Seafood Watch, from chefs like myself of the farm-raised Atlantic salmon, in which they had been working on for a long time and made big investments. Then they started to approach each and every one of the concerns one by one, and they made major changes in how they farmed their salmon. They would create a farm pen They would put a lower density amount of fish in there so they're not stressed. They didn't play Mozart or Beethoven, but it had the same effect on them. They were calm and they were healthy fish. The environment was cleansing itself with these tidal changes in the Bay of Fundy. Awesome. There was less escapes. They double reinforced their nets. They don't want to lose their investment, so I mean, they made sure that they shored up those pens, those nets. Fish ratio, we're talking about carnivorous dinners that we're consuming. These fish eat fish, so you need marine protein in order to produce fish. So if it takes 10 pounds of sardines to make 1 pound of salmon, bad idea. We're going to run out of sardines, and all the other fish that need that to thrive as well, we're going to lose them. So the ratios started to change. The marine protein was still a part of it, but then they started to incorporate more vegetation and then grain and other animal products to create what they call now a protein positive result. It takes less marine protein to create a pound of farm-raised Atlantic salmon. And I had a company that was asking me to help them to message all of the good work that they were doing, because right at that point everybody was deemed as a void from Seafood Watch. If it's farm-raised Atlantic salmon, just run away screaming. And I started to look at, well, let's see what changes you've made, guys. And for a full year, I talked to a brand, and it's called True North Salmon. It's Cook Aquaculture. They're a Canadian company that are also farming in the Gulf of Maine. And they've made major investments in integrated multi-trophic aquaculture. That's a mouthful of words that can talk or not about. But what it is it's investigating how nature handles stress. And so they realized that, well, there's different levels of the food chain that work together to create a harmonious and healthy environment. So if you're farming salmon here, and right next to it you start to farm some kelp or seaweed, that the nutrients from the byproducts of the salmon farm are very good for kelp. And kelp and mussels work well together. Another level of the species work well with the kelp and also with the nutrients that come from the salmon. So the three together in an integration of multi-trophic aquaculture situations creates a healthy environment that has an output of not only great salmon, but the environment is healthier, and you've got potential of mussels and seaweed and other things that are going to help us to have a much more rosy future for food security going forward as we grow as a planet. So, True North, great brand. I became a brand ambassador, I'm going to say, after a year, because I wanted to shout from the mountaintops the great work that Cook Aquaculture did in order to create the True North brand, in hopes that we can support that. Support the fact that there's aquaculture that's really good for you, good for your heart, and all those wonderful things that we're talking about today, but also hoping that other aquaculture companies would see that as a business model that is successful and that they would follow suit. And then within that mentality, we have a much more sustainable and healthy planet and future food sources on a continuous basis. That's my short version.
I love it. And I love that, I mean, as everyone is getting to know you here, so many people already do, but you are, more and more chefs are following in your footsteps as an educator and are going to the source and learning about this, but you're so unbelievably knowledgeable on that sustainability piece. And I think it's really helpful for people to understand what you went through and the process that you went through. But let's be clear. Absolutely none of that matters. Absolutely none of it matters if somebody doesn't like somebody doesn't like what it tastes. And as I like to say, better nutrition better be delicious. So yeah. I want to move over to your other area of expertise, and I thought I'd start in the right-hand corner because I'm such a fan of sardines, but I also know that there are sardines that taste amazing, and then there are sardines that I don't want to have. And as somebody who is not a trained chef, and he's not even a high-level home chef, you know, I'm always happy to integrate sardines into things or mackerel into things. but not in a way of if I was like making as a recipe for others, etc. So I would love for you to help us all start to enjoy, in particular, the small fish, but really talk a little bit about how you create recipes with fish and what you find works and any of the cheats that we can do at home.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of challenges when you're dealing with seafood. It's an extremely perishable product to inventory if you're running a business, and to ask people to step outside their comfort zone to try. You know, I was preaching and teaching, please eat lower on the food chain. Now, we are the great human race, and we all want to eat the top of the food chain, the large fish. You know, we want the tunas, the salmons, you know, all the big boys. That's what we want for dinner. You know, but we don't want all the things that come along with it. You know, when you're eating the top of the food chain from the ocean, you're also going to have higher concentrations, PCBs, methyl mercury, and all the things that you don't want. So I kept saying, lower on the food chain, loaded with omega-3s, great flavor, you know, and it was met with crickets. You know, no one, people were looking at me like you're crazy. I'm not eating that bait. You know, anchovies, sardines, herring, you know, alternate species of tuna such as skipjack and ahi, mackerel, all great for you. But no one was really running after me to say, good, let's go eat it all. So a trip to Spain years ago, I was in Madrid, and there I am. I'm in a tapas bar, and there's these things called boquerones, or white anchovies. And I look in there, and that was their specialty tapas of that particular bar. So I asked for it. They pull out this anchovy that's inside, that's submerged in olive oil. They put it on a piece of bread and hand it to me. That's it. A piece of fish on bread, you know, with some oil that came along with it. I ate it, and I had an epiphany. This was amazingly delicious, and it was preserved. So when I went back home, I'm at Oceana at the time, I'm at the Fulton Fish Market, and lo and behold, a box of shiny, right out of the water, anchovies. I grabbed them, I brought them back to my restaurant, and I processed them with my staff. I showed them how to fillet them with your thumb. You don't even need a knife. Pull them apart. Okay, now we're going to salt them lightly, going to put some white vinegar on them. 20 minutes later, we take them out, because they basically cooks them, it's like ceviche, and then we put them in olive oil. Now I'm ready in my 3-star New York Times Oceana restaurant to serve my guests. I couldn't get my staff behind it. They're looking at me like I'm like 3 heads. I get all excited, tell them the whole story, and they're not doing it. So I'm like, And here I am. I'm grilling naan bread. I'm making this beautiful pickled salad with peppers and green beans, haricot vert, and I'm putting these anchovies that were fresh just a few days ago that I marinated on these plates. I started giving them away to guests. I gave them to customers that were regulars, and they loved them. And they turned to my staff, the captains in the front of the house, and said, "These are amazing." They got confident. They started to sell more, and it took off. But that's what it took. I had to give away fish in order to get people to step out of their comfort zone. Okay, fast forward today. I'm still not having this great tipping point of success getting people to eat lower on the food chain. And I understand why chefs don't want to do it. I bought a box of sardines or anchovies early on. That has a shelf life of 2 days unless you grill them that day or preserve them. So let's look to the experts, people that are doing this in areas of the world such as, well, today we're talking about Portuguese sardines, the Bella brand. These are people that are taking seafood out of the ocean that are sustainably and wild caught, and within 8 hours they're cooking them, they're smoking them, they're putting them in cans, they're putting extra virgin olive oil on them, and I tried their products, and I'm going to tell you something. They are amazing, amazingly awesome. Okay. We've established Bella, great stuff. They have both also skipjack, tuna, and mackerel as part of their brand offerings. And you know what you get for a minimum amount. You buy a can of sardines, for instance, and you're getting 1,200 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acids, which you can. It's a lot, which is amazing. It's an omega-3 bomb. And what are we going to do with it? Okay, well, the other day, I opened one up and I made a kimchi out of it, like a a la minute. I dumped them right into a saute pan, and I added I added onions and ginger and turmeric, and I cooked it down. I spiced it up with hot sauce and some cider vinegar, and I served it over rice, and it was amazing. These fish are preserved in a can, so now you've got a shelf life that goes on and on and on. It's extended, so you're not in the panic mode. If I don't cook it today, it's not going to be good tomorrow. It's going to be good. It's great. It's unbelievable to have in your cabinet ready to go. I mean, I personally will eat a can of Bella of sardines in extra virgin olive oil right out of the can, and then that's that. That's all it needs. But the best way to enjoy it for yourself is it needs some acidity. It needs something pickled. So what I'm serving at my restaurant, we're opening cans tableside right now. I'm going to create the maitre d' de sardine, or sardine sommelier. We haven't come up with a name yet, but I serve it still with grilled naan bread, a pepper relish, and some spice to it. I make my own harissa, which is a fiery hot pepper paste. And then I serve also some raita, which is, or tzatziki. It's a cucumber yogurt combination. So you've got something creamy and delicious and cooling. You got something spicy. You've got some acidity. You've got some smokiness from grilling of a flatbread, and you're serving a can of sardines alongside of it. And that sounds maybe strange to someone, but does ordering a tin of 60 grams of caviar being served with little pancakes and eggs and onions. No, that's high class. That's the top of the world there. Well, if you treat a superior product coming from an amazing part of the world that's fully sustainable, true sardines in a can, it is for $3, which is about what you typically pay for a small tin of these. You're getting all of the omega-3s for your cardiovascular, your skin, your mental health. You're getting B12s, vitamin D, calcium. It's just health in a can. For not only your heart, like you said early on in the webinar, is for your entire body. I mean, when I grew up, Friday we'd eat seafood. My mom would say it's brain food, and I didn't give it much thought, but it certainly is. So, more ideas. Okay. I make crostinis, that piece of, your favorite crusty Italian bread. If you take any kind of fish that's preserved in oil that's of a good source, such as the Bella line, and just dump it into a pan, oil, fish, and all, right into a saute pan, and start to heat it up. Add some capers, some sun-dried tomatoes, so there you go. You've got your saltiness, you've got your acidity, and everything's in there. And then I take a whole, gigantic fistful of fresh spinach leaves and melt it down in there. So now the oils that came out of the can and everything is now integrating with the spinach, and you're adding incredible nutrition from spinach. You're getting your iron. You're getting, Ashley, you're the expert. I'm embarrassed to try to be an expert around you when it comes to nutrition. But then I'll serve it with hard-boiled eggs and put it on bread. If you do what I just said, it's just oil and fish, all right? It could be sardines, it could be tuna and oil. Just put it in the pan, make sure it's from a good source. Caper, sun-dried tomatoes, spinach, hard-boiled eggs after it comes out, after it's all sauteed. Warm on a piece of bread, let the juices soak into that bread and eat it. You will be looked at as the genius of geniuses. And it's delicious, it's balanced. You don't even know you're eating seafood for those that are afraid, and when you break it to them, they're going to feel better about themselves, and you're going to be the genius behind that whole thing. Now, if that's not your bag, go the salad route. Salad. I have in my refrigerator at home all the time a combination. I do it in a mason jar. I chop up some garlic. I put in some apple cider vinegar, some liquid aminos, and then I put in some flaxseed oil, and I shake it up. And the thing I like about flaxseed oil is it stays liquid while in the refrigerator. So, if you make this, put it in your fridge, you don't have to take it out and thaw it out. Like, how if you use extra virgin olive oil, which I love and I'm a big fan of, but it solidifies when it goes in the refrigerator. So other alternative oils, such as flaxseed, awesome. Grapeseed oil, also an oil that stays liquid in the refrigerator. So with that, I go in my backyard because I grow a lot of lettuces here in Las Vegas, and I just make a salad out of the greens back there. The other day I made a saute of 2 different kinds of chard, the leaves from a kohlrabi plant, and for some cabbage or crucifers, and some kale. It was unbelievable, you know. So, and then you add some crunch, cucumbers, carrots, etc., and use that vinaigrette, and add some canned seafood to add the protein, and you're eating perfectly, and it's delicious. This is not like, all right, let me hold my nose and eat this so I get it over with. These are things that you'll crave, and if you're working out and you experience the rush of flavors and the benefits, all of a sudden you're feeling better. You know, your mood it stabilizes from the CoQ10, which is an antioxidant in a lot of seafood. You know, you get more energy, your muscle recovers faster, your mood raises up as a result of that, as well as just the fat that's feeding your brain. And it's all coming from the ocean and not necessarily a supplement. And I'm not down on supplements. Supplements are important for those that can't, you know, continuously get it from whole sources like you were saying earlier. I just feel that, you know, if you're going to get a supplement of omega-3s, I'd like to make sure that they're either refrigerated or, you know, or their source of the omega-3s is on the label, like, you know, from pollock, from Alaskan pollock, for instance, is one. And that.
So I thought, Rick, I'm going to jump in because I thought I would play. We only have a little bit of time. We did get a question or two, but I thought I would play one. It's just something I want to do with you. Very quickly, I have 5 really heart-healthy foods, and I'm going to name the ingredient, and I would love just for you, like the first thing that comes to mind of what you would do with them.
Okay.
Are you ready? Okay. So the first one, walnuts. The first one is walnuts. There's just 5.
Walnuts.
What's your favorite way to have fun? Yep.
I make nut milk out of walnuts and cashews. I soak them in water, put them in the refrigerator, and let them reabsorb the liquid so they soften. I put them in a blender with a little bit of honey and just blend it up, and it's delicious.
Yum.
And drink it.
Love that. Okay, so what about oats?
Oats. I'm going to be boring with oats. I love oatmeal. I really do. It's
Awesome.
something that sticks with me forever. And I love the whole steel cut oatmeals, you know, Irish style oatmeal. You know, and what I do with that, because I don't know, I don't have the time in the morning to make this oatmeal. What I do when I'm working out and I want to have oatmeal in the morning, I take those cut oats, McCann's. I'm throwing the brand out there because it's available. And I will bring the water and a pinch of salt to a boil, add the steel cut oats, bring it back to a boil, cook it for about half a minute to a minute, cover it, put it in the back of the stove and let it set overnight. The next morning, it has absorbed all the liquid and it's crunchy, it's nutty. You warm it up and you can add whatever you want to it. I add bananas, or maple syrup, or honey to sweeten it slightly, and just I scoff it down, you know. And oats are also great in muffins and baking and etc.
And you only need 1, so this is good. Okay, so the next one, we're going to keep going. We're going to go quickly. Olives.
Olives. What do I do with olives? I put olives in everything. When I'm making pasta or making any kind of a chicken dish, I like adding olives and tomatoes to add a lot of flavor to make chicken more interesting. And what else? Olives, and I'll make a tapenade, which is a puree of olives and anchovies and extra virgin olive oil, a little lemon.
Awesome. And what about cacao, chocolate?
Chocolate. Well, chocolate has become my favorite late night snack with cherries. I get frozen black cherries and chocolate. And only a small amount at the end of the night helps me to sleep better, and it puts me in a good mood.
I love that. And you know, chocolate has one of the, in cacao in particular, one of the highest sources of magnesium. So that's exactly why it's helping you on that part. And then the final one, The final one, which I want to remind people is heart healthy in moderation, is, and sometimes not in moderation, red wine. Do you enjoy wine?
Huh. You asked me what I would do with red wine. I pour it in the glass and enjoy it most of the time. But I mean,
You passed the test. Wonderful. Oh my gosh, Rick, we could talk. There's so many different things, but you were the person that I wanted to talk to. In particular, I opened the whole conversation up about heart health not being, the heart is not separate from the brain, the body, the skin, all the other things that we care about. And so heart health nutrition is really better nutrition. But one of the biggest barriers, and in particular when we're talking about those small fish, the sardine, the mackerel, the herring, the anchovies, etc., that we should be eating, that even we could take a lesson from the bigger animals that are eating those for better health. That part of it is just making those approachable. So I'm really grateful for you joining us. If anyone is ever out in Las Vegas, please go to RM Seafood. And as I mentioned earlier, you can also get Rick's steak knives and I have that big container of knives that I now cut, chop, and dice everything. I feel very like Rick Moonen when I'm in my kitchen now. So very grateful for the blades. And we also have those on my website if people, I think we have a discount actually even, so if people want to go on there. And Matt, did we end up with any questions, or I know we're close to finished?
Yeah, we have a little time. We got a couple of questions. I think we probably have time for one question, and seeing as I'm choosing, it's one that I'm actually interested in the answer. So the question, are there fish I shouldn't eat, and how do I know?
It's a great question. And every day we get different conflicting information in the news. In fact, somebody just sent me a video about farmed fish, saying like, wait a second, what about the pollutants here? Rick, I'm going to let you answer this one because you did answer it in your overall discussion, but very specifically, are there fish that you are not serving today, and how can someone know?
Well, how can someone know? Hopefully, everyone's going to download Seafood Watch on their phones, and they'll know instantaneously if it's green or if it's yellow, that you can, with confidence, order and enjoy, hopefully from wherever you are, whether it's a restaurant or a fish counter. Fish to avoid, the ones that have been overexploited, the ones we've loved a little too much, like Chilean sea bass. Make sure that it's Marine Stewardship Council approved, that it's MSC approved. When it comes to aquaculture, best aquaculture practice, BAP, is a good thing to look for on the label. And brands, we were talking about it, Bella, for instance, and True North. These are good brands. I mean, the research has been done by experts such as yourself. I've had a single subject focus on this for 3 decades of my career, so I know a little bit, I would say. And we want to avoid, orange roughy. This is a fish that, takes so long to reach sexual maturity, that has such a sweet name. Orange roughy, I'll take it. Well, unfortunately, we love that one almost to extinction. And what other? I would avoid aquaculture from countries other than the United States if possible. Let's support U.S. fisheries. Over 90% of what comes from U.S. fisheries gets exported. Let's realize that it's worth the price to pay. Atlantic salmon from the Gulf of Maine. All of the wild salmon are great. Sockeye, Kita, Coho, and King. Cod. Alaskan seafoods are an amazing fishery. They really have a great system of making sure that there's a sustainable environment. So I'm talking about halibut. Dungeness crab from Alaska is actually quite good. Halibut, I said. What else is there? Black cod or sablefish, extremely high in omega-3s and delicious. So, support Alaska, support farms, oysters, mussels, clams, all good for the environment and good for you. As long as you don't have an issue with that. I think they're delicious, and great way of getting zinc and what was it, calcium, vitamin D,
Yeah.
so much more.
And I'm going to conclude with a comment because I have to, of course, be all dietitian here. And part of that is when you ask about what should you avoid, a huge part, I always focus on you don't want to accept any recommendation until you know who you are right now. So a big part of this is assessment, and definitely on my website, I have the Better Checkup checklist to take into your doctor. And one of the conversations you may need to have is, are you someone who has or are concerned about exposure to heavy metals or to other toxins? And there may be other reasons that you in particular should be avoiding, or on the flip side, incorporating more. But the other part about it is portion size is a really big factor. And one of the things that we want to pay attention to is the quantity. When you look at those tiny sardines, and you look at a can, and you can even 1 or 2 servings depending on the cans. We want to remind ourselves that it's not about getting some of the fish fillets that I see served in restaurants are several servings for one person. So we want to pay attention to portion size. We want to do an assessment. And then I think the final piece is also making sure that first and foremost, your diet is plant-based. Just like fish, their diet is plant-based. We all do better with plants. And the other piece is rotating. What we want to make sure that we're not doing is always hyper-focusing in on one type of fish. So just like I get the question all the time, almonds, people ask me, like, are almonds the best nut? No. All the nuts provide different nutrition, all the seeds, nuts and seeds. And in the same way, we want to be focusing in on variety in our seafood consumption. So that's a wrap for us on heart health and on seafood. Rick, thank you a million, and really grateful for everyone for joining today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Ashley.
Well, thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Rick. My taste buds loved this webinar. Our next webinar, 23rd of March at 2 p.m. Get better nutrition today. Hope to see you then. Thank you to Bella as well.